In the summer of 1943, when most women were expected to roll bandages and grow victory gardens, one young woman walked into a military recruitment office with a request that would make seasoned officers question everything they thought they knew about warfare. Her name was Elena Kozlov, and she was about to prove that the deadliest weapons don't always come in the packages you expect. What happened next would echo through the halls of military history, inspire a generation of female warriors, and earn her a code name that would be whispered with equal parts fear and respect across 3 continents. This is the true story of how a farm girl from Nebraska became the most feared sniper the world had never heard of, until now. The generals who once laughed at her request would soon learn that when someone earns the designation Black Talon Mark, laughter becomes the last sound their enemies ever hear. The recruitment office smelled of cigarettes, stale coffee, and broken dreams. Elena Kozlov stood in the doorway, her worn leather boots clicking against the wooden floor as she stepped inside. The morning sun cast long shadows across the room, where 3 officers sat behind a metal desk, papers scattered like fallen leaves around them. Captain Morrison looked up first, his weathered face breaking into what he thought was a welcoming smile. Elena was 22 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, and green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple blue dress that had seen better days, but she carried herself with a confidence that made the officers pause. "What can we do for you, miss?" Morrison asked, setting down his pen. Behind him, Lieutenant Rodriguez continued shuffling through enlistment papers while Sergeant Baker barely glanced up from his coffee. Elena stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. "I want to enlist, sir. I want to serve my country." The 3 men exchanged glances. It was July 1943, and while women were contributing to the war effort in unprecedented ways, they were typically assigned to support roles: nurses, clerks, radio operators, factory workers. The idea of a woman in combat was still largely unthinkable to most military minds. "That's admirable," Rodriguez said, finally looking up. "We have several programs for women. You could train as a nurse or work in communications. With your neat appearance, you might do well in administrative duties." Elena shook her head slowly. "I don't want to be a nurse or a clerk, sir. I want to be a sniper." The room fell silent. Baker's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. Rodriguez blinked twice, as if he hadn't heard correctly. Morrison leaned back in his chair, the springs creaking under his weight. Then the laughter started. It began as a chuckle from Baker, then spread to Rodriguez, and finally erupted into full belly laughs from all 3 men. Morrison wiped tears from his eyes while Rodriguez slapped his knee. The sound echoed off the bare walls, making Elena's request seem even more absurd. "A sniper," Morrison repeated between gasps. "Did you hear that, boys? The little lady wants to be a sniper." Elena remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged. She had expected this reaction. Growing up on a farm in Nebraska, she had faced skepticism her entire life. When she outshot her brothers at age 12, they claimed it was luck. When she consistently brought home more game than the men in her county, they said it was beginner's luck that would fade. When she could place 5 shots through a silver dollar at 300 yards, they insisted the wind must have been just right. "Miss," Baker said, trying to compose himself, "do you have any idea what being a sniper involves? It's not like shooting rabbits in your backyard." Elena's jaw tightened slightly. "I know exactly what it involves, Sergeant. I've been hunting since I was 8 years old. I can place a bullet anywhere I want it to go from distances you probably can't even see clearly." Rodriguez laughed again. "Hunting deer is a bit different from warfare, sweetheart. Combat requires skills that—" He stopped mid-sentence as Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a newspaper clipping. She placed it on the desk, smoothing it carefully with her fingers. The headline read, "Local Woman Wins State Shooting Championship for 3rd Consecutive Year." Morrison picked up the clipping, his laughter fading. The article described Elena's victory in the Nebraska State long-range shooting competition, where she had defeated 47 men with a perfect score. The photograph showed her holding a trophy nearly as tall as she was, surrounded by men who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "This is impressive," Morrison admitted, "but competition shooting and combat are entirely different animals." Elena reached into her purse again, this time producing a letter with military letterhead. This is from Colonel James Hartwell. He observed my performance at the interstate competition last month. He suggested I contact you directly. Baker took the letter, his expression growing serious as he read. Colonel Hartwell was a legend in military circles, a man whose word carried weight from Washington to the European theater. His letter was brief, but powerful, describing Elena's shooting as supernatural and recommending immediate consideration for specialized training. Even so, Rodriguez said, though his tone had lost its mocking edge, the physical demands of sniper training are enormous. The psychological pressure alone, Elena interrupted him quietly. Last winter, I tracked a wounded mountain lion for 3 days through a blizzard. I stayed motionless in a tree for 14 hours waiting for the perfect shot to ensure it didn't suffer. When I finally took the shot, it was at 400 yards in near whiteout conditions. The bullet went exactly where I intended, ending the animal's pain instantly. The room grew quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. The officers were beginning to realize they weren't dealing with a naive farm girl seeking adventure. Morrison cleared his throat. Miss Kozlov, while your credentials are certainly impressive, there are protocols to follow. Women aren't typically assigned to combat roles, and sniper training is one of our most elite programs. Elena nodded slowly. I understand, Captain, but these aren't typical times, are they? The war is demanding everything we have to give. Every able-bodied person who can contribute to victory should be given that chance. She paused, letting her words sink in. I can do things with a rifle that most men can't do. I can remain motionless for hours. I can calculate wind speed and bullet drop in my head. And I can take a life when necessary without hesitation. Isn't that exactly what you need? Baker set down his coffee cup and leaned forward. You make it sound simple, but killing another human being isn't like putting down an animal. The psychological impact. Elena's green eyes met his steadily. My father was killed at Pearl Harbor, Sergeant. He was a mechanic on a USS Arizona. My brother died at Guadalcanal 3 months ago. My fiancée was shot down over Germany last week. Her voice remained calm, but something flickered in her eyes. I understand exactly what this war has cost, and I understand exactly what it means to take a life in service of something greater than myself. The 3 officers exchanged glances again, but this time there was no amusement in their expressions. They were looking at a woman who had already paid the ultimate price for this war, who had every right to serve and every qualification to excel. Morrison picked up his pen, then set it down again. Miss Kozlov, even if we were inclined to consider your request, there are channels to go through, approvals to obtain. This kind of decision would have to come from much higher up the chain of command. Elena reached in her purse one final time and placed a single item on the desk. It was a military dog tag, worn and dented. This belonged to my brother. The last letter I received from him said that the war would be won by the people willing to do what others couldn't or wouldn't do. She looked at each man in turn. I'm willing to do what others can't. Rodriguez picked up the dog tag, examining the information etched into the metal. Private First Class Michael Kozlov, killed in action defending Henderson Field. He had been 19 years old. The silence stretched for several long minutes. Finally, Morrison spoke. Miss Kozlov, we'll need to make some calls. This kind of decision is beyond our authority. Elena nodded. Understand, sir. How long should I expect to wait? Morrison glanced at his watch. General Patterson is reviewing special assignments this afternoon. If you're willing to wait, we might be able to get you an audience today. Elena straightened. I'll wait as long as necessary, sir. The next 4 hours passed slowly. Elena sat in the hard wooden chair beside the reception desk, watching as young men came and went, each one eager to serve their country in whatever capacity they were allowed. Some looked barely old enough to shave, while others were clearly veterans of previous conflicts. All of them glanced at her with curiosity, wondering what a woman was doing in a recruitment office. During the wait, Elena overheard fragments of conversations that painted a grim picture of the war's progress. The Italian campaign was proving more difficult than anticipated. Casualties in the Pacific were mounting. The planned invasion of France would require every available asset, every possible advantage. At 3 o'clock, the door to the back office opened, and Morrison emerged with an expression Elena couldn't read. "Miss Kozlov, General Patterson will see you now." Elena followed Morrison down a narrow corridor lined with photographs of military leaders and battle scenes. The general's office was spartanly furnished, but impressive in its authority. Behind a massive wooden desk sat a man in his 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to look right through her. General Patterson didn't stand when she entered, but he gestured to a chair in front of his desk. "Sit down, Miss Kozlov. I've been reviewing your file." Elena took the offered seat, noticing that her file was surprisingly thick for someone who had never served in the military. The general had clearly done his homework in just a few hours. "Captain Morrison tells me you want to be a sniper," Patterson said without preamble. "That's an unusual request from someone in your circumstances." Elena met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir, it is." Patterson leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "I've spoken with Colonel Hartwell. He says you're the best natural shooter he's ever seen. High praise from a man who doesn't give it lightly. I'm grateful for his confidence, sir." The general opened her file and pulled out several documents. "I've also spoken with the sheriff in your home county. He says you've been helping his department with difficult situations for the past 2 years. Long-range problems that required precision." Elena nodded, but said nothing. The sheriff's department had called on her when they needed to resolve situations that required surgical accuracy. A hostage situation where the perpetrator had to be neutralized without harming the victim. A rabid animal that threatened a school, but was too close to children for anyone else to risk the shot. "Tell me," Patterson said, setting the papers aside, "why should I risk valuable training time and resources on someone the Army isn't designed to accommodate?" Elena had expected this question and had prepared her answer carefully. "Because, General, this war isn't going to be won by following the same rules that applied in peacetime. The enemy doesn't care about our conventions or our comfort zones. They'll use every weapon, every strategy, every person they have available." She paused. "Shouldn't we do the same?" Patterson studied her for a long moment. "The training is brutal, Miss Kozlov. It's designed to break people down and rebuild them. Many men don't make it through." "I'm not most people, sir." The general almost smiled. "No, I don't believe you are." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parade ground where soldiers were conducting drills. "If I approve this, you'll be the first woman to enter our sniper program. You'll face opposition from instructors who don't want you there, fellow trainees who think you don't belong, and the military establishment that isn't ready for what you represent." Elena stood as well. "I'm prepared for that, sir." Patterson turned back to face her. "Are you prepared to kill, Miss Kozlov? Not in the heat of battle, not in self-defense, but coldly and deliberately from a distance? Are you prepared to take a life and then wait patiently for the next target?" Elena thought of her father, buried somewhere in the wreckage of Pearl Harbor. She thought of her brother, who would never come home from the Pacific. She thought of her fiancé, shot down over enemy territory with no chance of rescue. "Yes, sir, I am." General Patterson walked back to his desk and picked up his pen. For several seconds, he hesitated, the weight of his decision apparent in his expression. Then he began to write. "Report to Camp Mackle in North Carolina on Monday morning. Training begins at 0500 hours. He looked up at her. "Don't make me regret this decision, Miss Kozlov." Elena felt her heart racing, but her voice remained steady. "You won't, sir. I promise you won't." As she left the general's office, Elena could hear Morrison and the other officers discussing her case in hushed tones. Words like unprecedented and risky drifted through the door. But she had accomplished what she came to do. She had convinced the United States Army to give her a chance. Walking out into the afternoon sun, Elena thought about the journey ahead. She knew the training would be unlike anything she had ever experienced. She knew she would face skepticism, hostility, and challenges designed to break her spirit. But she also knew something the doubters didn't understand yet. She wasn't just Elena Kozlov from Nebraska anymore. She was about to become something the world had never seen before. Something that would make the enemy fear shadows and question every movement in their own territory. She was about to become the weapon they never saw coming. Camp Mackle sprawled across the North Carolina landscape like a wound that refused to heal. The morning mist clung to the ground as Elena stepped off the transport truck, her single duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Around her, 43 men climbed down from various vehicles, each one looking as nervous as she felt. The training facility looked exactly like what it was designed to be, a place where comfortable assumptions went to die. Barracks stretched in neat rows across cleared ground, while beyond them lay obstacle courses, shooting ranges, and vast stretches of wilderness where trainees would learn to disappear completely. "Listen up, maggots!" The voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Master Sergeant William Knox emerged from the shadows near the main building, his presence immediately commanding attention from every person in the group. He was a compact man with scars on his hands and a face that suggested he had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Knox's eyes swept over the assembled recruits, pausing briefly on Elena before moving on. His expression gave nothing away, but she could sense his assessment. Every other instructor at the camp had probably already expressed opinions about the experiment she represented. "For the next 12 weeks, your pathetic lives belong to me," Knox continued, his voice carrying clearly across the group. "Some of you think you're here because you're special. Some of you think you've already proven yourselves. Let me tell you something. Everything you think you know about shooting, about fighting, about surviving, is worthless here." He began walking along the line of recruits, examining each one like a farmer inspecting livestock. Sniper training isn't about being the best shot in your unit. It's not about being tough or brave or patriotic. It's about becoming something your enemy can't understand, can't predict, and can't survive. Knox stopped directly in front of Elena. Up close, she could see that his left eye was slightly clouded, probably from an old injury. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that only she could hear. "You've got more people watching you fail than succeed, recruit. Every instructor, every officer, every politician who thinks this whole thing is a mistake will be measuring your performance against their preconceptions." He paused, studying her face. "The question is whether you're here to prove them wrong or prove them right." Elena met his gaze steadily. "I'm here to learn, Sergeant. Everything else is just noise." Knox's mouth twitched slightly, though whether in approval or amusement was impossible to tell. He moved on to the next recruit, resuming his inspection. The first week was designed to break spirits and reveal weaknesses. Physical training began before dawn and continued until well after dark. Elena found herself running distances she had never imagined, carrying weights that seemed impossible, and enduring challenges that pushed every recruit to their absolute limits. On the third day, during a particularly brutal obstacle course run, she heard the whispered comments from some of her fellow trainees. "She's slowing us down. This is what happens when politics gets involved. She doesn't belong here." Elena said nothing, but she began pushing herself even harder. When the group was required to carry 50-pound packs for a 10-mile march, she volunteered to carry 60 pounds. When it had to navigate a water obstacle in full gear, she went first, showing the others how to manage the crossing efficiently. By the end of the first week, the complaints had stopped. The academic portion of training was equally demanding. Elena found herself studying ballistics, meteorology, camouflage techniques, and enemy tactics with an intensity that rivaled her college coursework. She learned about bullet trajectories in different atmospheric conditions, how to calculate wind drift at various distances, and how to read terrain features that would affect shot placement. Instructor Lieutenant Davis, a thin man with permanent ink stains on his fingers, seemed particularly skeptical of Elena's presence in his classroom. During their third ballistics lecture, he called on her without warning. "Kozlov, you're engaging a target at 800 yards. Wind is blowing from your left at 12 miles per hour. Target is moving at approximately 2 miles per hour from right to left. Your rifle is zeroed at 400 yards. Where do you aim?" Elena closed her eyes for a moment, visualizing the scenario. She could almost feel the wind on her face, could see the target moving through her imaginary scope. When she opened her eyes, her answer was precise and confident. "I'd aim approximately 14 inches left of center and 6 inches high, sir. The wind drift will push the bullet right, and the target's movement means I need to lead by roughly 8 inches. The bullet drop at 800 yards with my zero requires compensation of about 18 inches, but with the upward angle adjustment for atmospheric conditions, 6 inches high should put me center mass. Davis stared at her for several long seconds. That's exactly right. How did you calculate that so quickly? Elena shrugged slightly. I've been doing those calculations in my head since I was 12, sir. It's just a matter of understanding the relationships between all the variables. From that day forward, Davis treated Elena with the same respect he showed the other top students in the class. More importantly, word spread among the other instructors that the female recruit wasn't just competent, she was exceptional. The real test came during the 6th week, when training moved to the advanced shooting ranges. Each recruit was assigned a rifle and required to demonstrate proficiency at distances ranging from 300 to 1,000 yards under various conditions. Elena's assigned weapon was an M1903 Springfield rifle with an unertl scope, a combination that had proven effective in the hands of skilled marksmen throughout the war. As she settled into her first shooting position, she could feel the attention of every instructor and recruit focused on her performance. The target was a standard silhouette at 600 yards. Elena took her time, feeling the wind on her face, noting the light conditions, and settling into the comfortable familiarity of the shooting position. When she finally squeezed the trigger, the rifle's recoil felt like an old friend welcoming her home. The spotter called out the result, dead center, X-ring. Over the next 3 hours, Elena fired shots at distances ranging from 400 to 900 yards. Every shot landed within the kill zone, and most were grouped so tightly they could have been covered by a silver dollar. By the time she finished, a small crowd had gathered to watch. Master Sergeant Knox walked up to the shooting line and examined Elena's target through binoculars. After several minutes, he lowered the glasses and looked at her with something approaching respect. That's some of the finest shooting I've ever seen, recruit. How long have you been practicing? Elena stood up, carefully safing her rifle. Since I was 8 years old, Sergeant. My father taught me to shoot, and I've been practicing ever since. Knox nodded slowly. Your father taught you well, but shooting at stationary targets in perfect conditions isn't the same as what you'll face in combat. The next phase of training addressed that exact concern. Recruits were taught to shoot from uncomfortable positions, in adverse weather, and while under simulated stress. They learned to engage moving targets, to shoot through vegetation, and to make split-second decisions about target priority. Elena excelled at every challenge. When required to hit targets while lying in freezing water, her shots remained precise. When tasked with engaging multiple targets in rapid succession, her transitions were smooth and her accuracy unwavering. When challenged to make shots through small gaps in foliage, she found angles other recruits couldn't even see. But the most important lesson came during a night exercise in the 8th week. The scenario involved infiltrating enemy territory, establishing a hide site, and engaging specific targets while avoiding detection by patrol units. Elena moved through the darkness like she had been born to it. Her years of hunting in Nebraska forests had taught her to read terrain by touch, to move without sound, and to become invisible in natural surroundings. She found a position overlooking the target area and settled in to wait. For 6 hours, she remained motionless while patrol units passed within yards of her location. Through her scope, she could see her assigned targets moving around a mock enemy camp, but she waited for the perfect opportunity. Finally, as dawn approached, the targets aligned themselves for a clear shot. Elena's first shot dropped the primary target instantly. Her second shot, taken 3 seconds later, eliminated the backup target before he could react. She then melted back into the forest, avoiding the searchers who flooded the area looking for the sniper who had seemingly vanished into thin air. When the exercise ended, Knox found Elena waiting calmly at the extraction point, her rifle cleaned and her gear properly stowed. She had accomplished the mission without leaving any trace of her presence. Outstanding work, Kozlov, Knox said, and this time his approval was unmistakable. That was textbook sniper work. Word of Elena's performance spread quickly through the camp hierarchy. By the 9th week, officers she had never met were stopping by to observe her training. During a particularly challenging stalking exercise, she noticed a staff car parked near the observation post, its occupant watching her progress through binoculars. The final weeks of training focused on the psychological aspects of sniper warfare. Elena learned about target identification, rules of engagement, and the mental preparation required for taking human life in combat. These lessons were taught with clinical precision, but their weight was unmistakable. During one particularly intense lecture, Instructor Captain Williams addressed the psychological impact of sniper operations. The distance at which you engage your targets can create a false sense of detachment, he explained. But make no mistake, every shot you take in combat will end someone's life. Someone with family, friends, dreams, and fears just like your own. Elena listened carefully to these warnings, understanding their importance. She had taken life before, but only animals and only when necessary for survival or mercy. The prospect of deliberately targeting another human being required a different kind of mental preparation. The enemy you face, Williams continued, has chosen to wage war against everything you believe in. They have chosen to threaten your country, your family, and your way of life. When you look through your scope, remember that your mission is to protect the innocent and defend freedom itself. During the 11th week, Elena faced her final practical examination. The test involved a complex scenario requiring her to infiltrate simulated enemy territory, gather intelligence, eliminate specific high-value targets, and extract without detection. The entire exercise was designed to replicate actual combat conditions as closely as possible. Elena approached the challenge with the same methodical preparation she brought to every aspect of her training. She studied maps of the test area, analyzed weather patterns, and planned multiple routes for infiltration and extraction. When the exercise began, she moved with confidence born of weeks of intensive preparation. The infiltration took place over 2 days of careful movement through hostile territory. Elena avoided simulated patrol routes, navigated around observation posts, and established her final hide site within effective range of the target area. Her position was so well concealed that instructors with the exact coordinates had difficulty locating her even when they knew where to look. The engagement phase required patience and precision. Elena's targets were instructors playing the roles of enemy officers, and they moved according to realistic patterns that required careful timing. She waited for nearly 8 hours before the perfect opportunity presented itself. Her first shot eliminated the primary target at a range of 750 yards. The second target, alerted by the first shot, began moving toward cover, but Elena's second bullet found him before he could reach safety. Her third and final shot, taken at maximum range through a narrow gap between trees, demonstrated the kind of precision that would become legendary. The extraction phase tested Elena's ability to disappear completely. Within minutes of taking her final shot, the area was flooded with searchers attempting to locate the sniper's position. Elena had already begun moving, following a carefully planned route that took advantage of terrain features and vegetation to mask her movement. She reached the extraction point 12 hours ahead of schedule, having covered nearly 20 miles of difficult terrain without being detected. When instructors arrived at the pickup location, they found Elena waiting calmly, her mission report already prepared. Knox reviewed her performance with something approaching amazement. In 15 years of running this program, I've never seen a student execute a final exercise with that level of precision and professionalism. Elena accepted the praise quietly, but inside she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had proven to herself and to everyone else that she belonged here. More importantly, she had discovered capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. On graduation day, Elena stood with 12 other recruits who had successfully completed the program. Of the original 44 candidates, 31 had either quit or been eliminated during training. The survivors represented the cream of military marksman talent, and Elena had graduated at the top of the class. General Patterson himself attended the ceremony, presenting each graduate with their sniper qualification badge and their first operational assignment. When he reached Elena, he paused before pinning the badge to her uniform. "Miss Kozlov," he said quietly, "you've exceeded every expectation. Your instructors tell me you're ready for immediate deployment to an active theater." Elena stood at attention, but her heart was racing. "Thank you, sir. I'm ready to serve." Patterson studied her face carefully. Your first assignment is to the European theater. You'll be attached to a special operations unit conducting deep reconnaissance behind enemy lines. He paused, lowering his voice so only she could hear. What you've accomplished here is just the beginning. The real test starts now. As Elena walked away from the ceremony, her new orders tucked securely in her pocket, she reflected on the transformation she had undergone. 12 weeks ago, she had been a farm girl from Nebraska with exceptional shooting skills. Now she was a qualified military sniper with training in combat operations, intelligence gathering, and psychological warfare. But more than that, she had discovered something about herself that would prove crucial in the battles ahead. Under pressure, in impossible circumstances, facing challenges that would break most people, she became calmer and more focused rather than panicked and uncertain. It was a quality that would soon earn her a reputation among both allies and enemies. It was the foundation of what would eventually become the legend of Black Talon Mark. The transport ship rolled heavily in the North Atlantic swells, its hull groaning against waves that seemed determined to drag it to the ocean floor. Elena gripped the rail of her narrow bunk, fighting the nausea that had plagued her for 3 days since leaving New York Harbor. Around her, 200 other soldiers dealt with seasickness in their own ways, some successfully, others not. Staff Sergeant Mike Chun occupied the bunk above hers, a compact demolitions expert from San Francisco who had taken Elena under his wing during the voyage. Unlike many of the other soldiers, Chun treated her presence as a tactical advantage rather than a political statement. First time crossing the Atlantic? Chun asked, noticing Elena's pale complexion as the ship pitched through another series of massive swells. Elena nodded carefully, not trusting her voice. Growing up in Nebraska, the largest body of water she had ever seen was the Platte River during spring flooding. The endless expanse of gray water surrounding their convoy was both beautiful and terrifying. "Gets easier," Chun assured her. "Your body adapts. Plus, once we hit the English Channel, the water's usually calmer." Elena managed a weak smile. "How much longer until we reach England?" Chun consulted a pocket watch that had belonged to his grandfather. "Captain says we should dock at Southampton tomorrow morning, weather permitting. From there, we transfer to a smaller vessel for the final approach to the operational area." The operational area was France, specifically the Normandy region where Allied forces had established a foothold 2 months earlier. Elena's orders directed her to report to Colonel Marcus Stone, commander of a joint intelligence and special operations unit known officially as the 42nd Reconnaissance Battalion. Unofficially, they were called the Ghost Company. Elena had researched the unit as much as security protocols allowed during her voyage. The Ghost Company specialized in deep penetration missions behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence, and conducting operations designed to disrupt German communications and supply lines. They worked in small teams, often operating independently for weeks at a time with minimal support. It was exactly the kind of assignment Elena had hoped for when she enlisted. The conventional warfare, taking place along the established front lines, offered limited opportunities for precision marksmanship. Behind enemy lines, however, a skilled sniper could achieve strategic impact far beyond what traditional forces could accomplish. The ship's public address system crackled to life, announcing dinner service in the main mess hall. Elena's stomach rebelled at the thought of food, but Chun insisted she needed to maintain her strength. "Trust me," he said, helping her navigate the narrow corridors as the ship continued its violent motion. "You need calories, especially with what's waiting for us in France." The mess hall was a scene of organized chaos, with soldiers attempting to eat while the floor tilted unpredictably beneath their feet. Elena managed to consume some bread and broth, keeping the simple meal down through sheer determination. At a nearby table, she overheard a conversation between several infantry officers discussing recent operations. The news was mixed. Allied forces had broken out of their initial beachhead and were advancing inland, but German resistance was fierce and well-organized. The enemy was using every advantage of familiar terrain and established defensive positions. "What we need," one lieutenant was saying, "is better intelligence about German troop movements. They're repositioning faster than our reconnaissance can track." Elena listened with professional interest. Intelligence gathering was one of her primary mission objectives, and she was eager to understand how her skills could contribute to the overall effort. The next morning brought calmer seas and Elena's first glimpse of the English coast. Southampton Harbor bustled with military activity as ships loaded and unloaded supplies, equipment, and personnel in a continuous cycle that had been ongoing since the invasion began. Elena gathered her gear and prepared to disembark. Her equipment was purposefully minimal. A modified M1903 Springfield rifle with specialized optics, a sidearm, basic field gear, and civilian clothing for potential undercover operations. Everything had been carefully selected for reliability and versatility in extended field conditions. The dock was controlled chaos. Military personnel with clipboards directed arriving soldiers to various staging areas while massive cranes unloaded vehicles and supplies from cargo ships. Elena reported to the designated assembly point for special operations personnel, where she found herself among a diverse group of soldiers whose assignments were clearly outside normal military channels. A British liaison officer checked Elena's orders and directed her to a smaller vessel tied up at the far end of the harbor. The boat was painted in Navy colors, but looked more like a civilian fishing vessel than a military transport. Its captain, a weathered man with a thick Yorkshire accent, greeted Elena with professional courtesy. "You'll be crossing tonight," he explained, leading her below deck to a small passenger compartment. "Channel's been quiet the last few days, but Jerry's still got patrol boats out there. We'll run dark and quiet until we reach the French coast." The crossing took 8 hours, with the vessel maintaining minimal speed to avoid detection. Elena spent the time reviewing maps of her operational area and studying German uniform identification charts. She needed to distinguish between regular Wehrmacht troops, SS units, and various auxiliary forces, as target priorities differed significantly. Dawn was breaking over the Normandy coast when Elena felt the boat's engines change rhythm, signaling their approach to shore. Through a small porthole, she could see the remnants of German beach fortifications that had been destroyed during the initial invasion. The evidence of recent combat was everywhere: burned-out bunkers, shattered concrete barriers, and equipment scattered across the sand. The landing was conducted with military precision. Elena waded through shallow water to reach a beach that had been transformed into a massive supply depot. Allied forces had constructed temporary roads, fuel storage areas, and communication centers among the dunes where German defenders had fought desperately just weeks before. Elena reported to the temporary headquarters tent, where she was met by Captain David Morrison, an intelligence officer responsible for coordinating special operations assignments. Morrison was a lean man in his 30s with eyes that seemed to catalog everything he observed. "Sergeant Kozlov," Morrison said, reviewing her orders. "Colonel Stone is eager to meet you. Your reputation preceded you across the Atlantic." Elena wondered what reputation Morrison was referring to, but she simply nodded acknowledgement. "I'm ready for assignment, sir." Morrison led Elena through the organized confusion of the supply depot to a more secure area where the Ghost Company maintained its headquarters. The setup was impressively mobile: radio equipment, map tables, and planning materials that could be packed and relocated quickly if tactical situations required it. Colonel Stone proved to be exactly what Elena had expected from the unit's reputation. He was a tall man with graying temples and the kind of calm authority that came from leading men in impossible situations. When Elena entered his makeshift office, he was studying aerial photographs of German positions with the intensity of a chess master planning his next move. "Sergeant Kozlov," Stone said, looking up from the photos, "I've been reading about your training performance. Master Sergeant Knox speaks very highly of your capabilities." Elena stood at attention. "Thank you, sir. I'm ready to contribute to the mission." Stone gestured for her to sit, then spread one of the aerial photographs across his desk. "I have an assignment that's perfect for your particular skills." German forces have established a communications center approximately 15 miles behind their main defensive lines. The facility coordinates artillery fire and troop movements across a significant portion of their front. Elena studied the photograph carefully. The target area showed a complex of buildings surrounded by defensive positions and guard posts. Intelligence annotations indicated the presence of high-ranking officers and sensitive communication equipment. The conventional approach, Stone continued, would require a large force to break through their defenses and assault the position directly. That kind of operation would be costly and would likely result in the destruction of the intelligence materials we're hoping to capture. Elena nodded, understanding the strategic problem. What's the alternative approach, sir? Stone smiled grimly. A more surgical solution. Two-person teams infiltrating the area over several days, gathering detailed intelligence about the facility's operations, and then eliminating specific high-value targets to disrupt their effectiveness without destroying the physical infrastructure. Elena felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of mission she had trained for, the kind of operation where precision marksmanship could achieve strategic impact. Your partner for this assignment, Stone continued, is Corporal Tommy Williams, a communications specialist with extensive experience in enemy equipment. Together, you'll penetrate German lines, establish observation posts, and conduct targeted operations against their command structure. Elena looked at the photograph again, this time with the eye of a sniper planning her approach. The terrain offered multiple routes for infiltration, several potential hide sites within effective range, and various options for extraction once the mission was complete. Timeline, sir? Elena asked. Stone consulted a folder of operational documents. You deploy tomorrow night. Intelligence indicates the Germans are planning a major offensive operation within the next week. If we can disrupt their communications during the preparation phase, it could significantly reduce their effectiveness. Elena spent the rest of the day preparing for the mission. She met with Corporal Williams, a slight young man from Georgia whose expertise with radio equipment was matched by his knowledge of German operational procedures. Williams had already spent 2 months operating behind enemy lines and understood the challenges they would face. The key, Williams explained as they reviewed their route, is patience. German security is thorough, but predictable. They focus on established roads and obvious approach routes. If we take our time and use terrain to our advantage, we could get close enough to observe their operations for several days before taking action. Elena appreciated Williams's methodical approach. Many soldiers wanted to rush into combat situations, but sniper operations required careful planning and precise execution. They studied maps, weather forecasts, and intelligence reports about German patrol schedules. Elena planned shooting positions for various scenarios, calculating distances, and identifying potential obstacles that might affect her shots. Williams prepared communication equipment that would allow them to report intelligence back to headquarters and call for support if necessary. As evening approached, Elena cleaned and checked her rifle one final time. The weapon had been modified with specialized optics and sound suppression equipment designed for covert operations. Every component had been tested and verified during her training, but she wanted to ensure perfect functionality before entering enemy territory. Colonel Stone gathered the entire team for a final briefing. The operation, designated Blackbird, would involve 3 two-person teams infiltrating different sectors of German-controlled territory simultaneously. Elena and Williams were assigned to the primary target, while the other teams would conduct supporting operations designed to create confusion and draw attention away from the main objective. Remember, Stone emphasized, intelligence gathering is your first priority. Don't engage targets unless absolutely necessary, or unless you're certain the tactical advantage justifies the risk of exposure. Elena nodded understanding. Her training had emphasized the importance of patience and target selection. A sniper who revealed their position prematurely often became the hunted rather than the hunter. As darkness fell over the Normandy coast, Elena and Williams prepared to cross into enemy territory. They wore civilian clothing acquired from French resistance sources, carried identification documents prepared by Allied intelligence, and moved with the confidence of people who belonged in the occupied countryside. The first phase of their infiltration took them through Allied lines and into the contested area between the two armies. This no-man's land was dangerous for both sides, patrolled irregularly, and subject to artillery fire from both directions. Elena moved through the darkness with the same skill she had used for hunting in Nebraska forests, reading terrain by touch and sound. Williams followed her lead, trusting her navigation abilities while focusing on the equipment that would be crucial to their mission success. They covered 12 miles during their first night of movement, establishing a temporary hide site in an abandoned barn that provided concealment and observation capabilities. As dawn broke, Elena could see German positions through her scope, noting guard rotations and patrol schedules that would be crucial information for future operations. Tomorrow night, we reached the primary observation site. Elena whispered to Williams as they settled in for a day of careful watching and planning. Williams nodded, checking his radio equipment one final time. Then, the real work begins. Elena studied the German positions through her scope, identifying officers, noting communication patterns, and beginning the target assessment that would determine their mission's ultimate success. She was no longer just Elena Kozlov from Nebraska. She was becoming something the German army had never encountered before, a ghost who could strike from impossible distances with surgical precision. The legend of Black Talon Mark was about to begin. The abandoned farmhouse sat on a low hill overlooking the German communications center, its broken windows and damaged roof providing perfect concealment for Elena's observation post. For 3 days, she and Williams had watched the enemy facility through carefully positioned openings in the structure's walls, documenting patterns of activity that would prove crucial to their mission's success. Elena lay prone behind her rifle, the weapon's bipod providing stable support as she studied the German compound through her scope. The facility consisted of 4 main buildings surrounded by defensive positions, guard towers, and communication antennas that reached toward the cloudy French sky. Patterns consistent. Williams whispered from his position near the radio equipment. Officer briefings every morning at 0800, shift changes at noon, and midnight. Supply convoy arrives every third day around 1500 hours. Elena nodded slightly, maintaining her observation routine. Through her scope, she could see individual German soldiers moving between buildings, their uniforms indicating different ranks and specialties. She had identified several high-value targets during their surveillance. The facility commander, his deputy, and the chief communications officer responsible for coordinating artillery fire. The intelligence they had gathered was already valuable. Williams had intercepted and decoded several enemy transmissions, providing headquarters with advance warning of planned German operations. But their mission required more than passive observation. They needed to disrupt the facility's operations without destroying the equipment that Allied forces hoped to capture intact. Primary target, Elena murmured, watching a German officer emerge from the main building. Through her scope, she could see the distinctive insignia of an Oberst, equivalent to a full colonel in the American Army. Intelligence reports indicated this man, Colonel Hans Mueller, commanded the entire communications network for this sector of the German front. Williams raised his binoculars, confirming the identification. That's him. Mueller's the one coordinating all artillery fire for the planned offensive. Elena tracked Mueller's movement across the compound, noting his regular patterns and identifying the best engagement opportunities. The German officer appeared to follow a strict schedule. Morning briefings in the communications center, afternoon inspections of defensive positions, evening meetings in his quarters. Range to the main building? Elena asked quietly. Williams consulted his rangefinder and calculations. 640 yards. Wind steady from the northwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. Elena made mental adjustments for the ballistic solution, accounting for wind drift, bullet drop, and the slight upward angle of her shooting position. At this range, under these conditions, she would need to aim approximately 6 inches left and 4 inches high to ensure center mass impact. But timing would be crucial. Elena needed to eliminate Mueller and his key subordinates in rapid succession, preventing any of them from alerting other German positions about the attack. A coordinated engagement would require split-second precision and perfect target identification. Movement, Williams said urgently, pointing toward the compound's main gate. Elena shifted her scope to observe a convoy of German vehicles entering the facility. 3 staff cars and a communications truck, their occupants clearly senior officers based on the attention they received from the compound's garrison. Through her scope, Elena watched as multiple high-ranking Germans exited the vehicles and moved toward the main building. This was an unexpected opportunity. Instead of targeting individuals over several days, she could potentially eliminate the entire enemy command structure in a single coordinated attack. Radio headquarters, Elena said quietly. Tell them we have multiple high-value targets in the same location. Request permission to engage immediately. Williams worked his radio with practiced efficiency, transmitting their situation report in coded bursts designed to avoid German detection. The response came within minutes. Engage at your discretion. Extraction support will be available at Rally Point Delta in 4 hours. Elena felt her heartbeat slow as she entered the mental state that made her such an effective sniper. Everything unnecessary faded away, leaving only the scope image, the wind conditions, and the targets moving through her field of view. The German officers gathered on the steps of the main building, apparently discussing some aspect of their planned operations. Elena could see 6 men clearly, each one representing a crucial link in the enemy's command structure. Left to right, Elena whispered, describing her engagement sequence to Williams. Mueller first, then the communications chief, then the artillery coordinator. Williams raised his binoculars, ready to spot Elena's shots and provide immediate feedback on target effects. Confirmed. I have all targets in sight. Elena centered her crosshairs on Colonel Mueller's chest, accounting for wind and distance with calculations that had become second nature through years of practice. Her breathing slowed to a deliberate rhythm, her finger finding the trigger's break point. The first shot was perfect. Mueller dropped instantly, the bullet striking exactly where Elena had aimed. The other German officers began reacting to the sudden collapse of their commander, but Elena was already transitioning to her second target. The communications chief was reaching for his sidearm when Elena's second bullet found him. The man spun and fell, his weapon clattering across the concrete steps. Confusion spread through the group as the surviving officers tried to understand what was happening. Elena's third shot eliminated the artillery coordinator before he could reach cover. The remaining Germans finally realized they were under sniper attack and began scrambling for protection, but Elena had already achieved her primary objectives. 3 down, Williams confirmed through his binoculars. Direct hits on all primary targets. Elena maintained her position, scanning for additional opportunities. The compound had erupted into activity as soldiers responded to the attack, searching for the sniper's position and establishing defensive perimeters. Secondary targets moving to cover, Elena reported. Compound security is responding rapidly. Williams monitored his radio frequencies, listening for German communications about the attack. They're confused about the direction of fire. Some units think it came from the eastern approach. Elena smiled grimly. Her position was northwest of the compound, but the angles and timing of her shots had created uncertainty about the sniper's location. This confusion would be crucial for their extraction. Time to move, Elena said, beginning to pack a rifle. They'll saturate this area with artillery soon. Williams gathered his equipment quickly, ensuring all radio gear was properly secured. Their extraction route had been planned carefully, taking advantage of terrain features and vegetation that would mask their movement from German observation posts. Elena led the way, moving through the farmhouse's rear exit and into the hedgerows that characterized the Normandy countryside. These ancient field boundaries provided excellent concealment, allowing them to move toward their rally point without exposing themselves to enemy observation. Behind them, the German compound continued its frantic activity. Elena could hear vehicles starting, radio traffic increasing, and what sounded like preparation for a major search operation. But they had a crucial advantage. The enemy didn't know exactly where to look. The extraction route took them through 2 miles of hostile territory, following stream beds and fence lines that provided concealment from German patrol routes. Elena moved with the confidence of someone who had spent years navigating unfamiliar terrain, reading landscape features, and choosing paths that offered maximum cover. Williams followed her lead, trusting her navigation abilities while monitoring radio frequencies for intelligence about German response activities. The enemy was clearly organizing a major search effort, but Their uncertainty about the sniper's position meant they were spreading their resources across a wide area. Checkpoint 1. Elena whispered as they reached a predetermined waypoint. Their timing was excellent. They were ahead of schedule and had encountered no enemy contact during their initial movement. Williams checked his compass and confirmed their position. Rally point is 1 mile northeast. Terrain looks clear. They continued their careful movement, using natural features to mask their progress toward the extraction point. Elena's training and stalking techniques proved invaluable, allowing them to move through occupied territory without detection. As they approached the rally point, Elena heard the distant sound of aircraft engines. Allied fighter bombers were conducting operations in the area, potentially providing additional confusion for German forces trying to locate the sniper team. The rally point was a small grove of trees near an abandoned village, chosen for its concealment and accessibility to extraction vehicles. Elena and Williams arrived 30 minutes early, using the extra time to establish security and prepare for pickup. Extraction team, this is Blackbird. Williams transmitted on the designated frequency. Package is secure, ready for pickup. The response came immediately. Blackbird, this is Eagle. Inbound your location, estimated arrival 15 minutes. Elena maintained overwatch while Williams prepared their equipment for rapid loading. The extraction would need to be conducted quickly to avoid German interference. The sound of approaching vehicles reached them before the visual contact. 2 Allied jeeps emerged from the tree line, their crews armed and ready for potential combat during the pickup operation. Colonel Stone himself was in the lead vehicle, indicating the importance he placed on this mission's success. As Elena and Williams climbed aboard, Stone's expression showed both relief and professional satisfaction. Outstanding work, Stone said as they began moving toward Allied lines. Intelligence indicates you eliminated the entire command structure for this sector's communication network. Elena accepted the praise quietly, but she was already thinking about the implications of their success. The German offensive that had been planned for this sector would now face significant coordination problems without its communication leadership. What's the follow-up? Elena asked. Stone consulted a folder of documents. Allied forces will exploit the confusion you've created. A coordinated attack on the facility is planned for tomorrow morning, while German forces are still trying to reorganize their command structure. The journey back to headquarters took them through liberated territory where Allied forces were consolidating their positions and preparing for continued offensive operations. Elena could see the impact of successful operations like theirs. German resistance was becoming less coordinated, their defensive positions were being abandoned, and Allied forces were gaining momentum. Back at headquarters, Elena and Williams were debriefed extensively about their observations and the tactical intelligence they had gathered. Their detailed reports about German defensive positions, patrol schedules, and communication procedures would be valuable for future operations. But the most significant impact of their mission became apparent the next day. German forces in their operational sector failed to launch their planned offensive, apparently due to communication failures and command confusion. The artillery coordination that would have supported their attack never materialized, leaving German infantry units without the support they needed to achieve their objectives. 3 days later, Allied forces successfully captured the communications facility, recovering intact equipment and intelligence materials that provided crucial information about German defensive plans across the entire front. Colonel Stone called Elena to his headquarters for a private meeting. When she arrived, she found him studying a map marked with recent Allied advances, many of them in sectors where successful sniper operations had disrupted German command structures. Sergeant Kozlov, Stone said, looking up from the map, your work has exceeded every expectation. The impact of precision operations like yours is proving to be far greater than anyone anticipated. Elena studied the map, noting the areas where sniper teams have been active and the corresponding Allied successes. It seems like small unit operations are having strategic impact, sir. Stone nodded emphatically. Exactly, which is why I'm recommending you for immediate promotion and assignment to a new operational unit we're establishing. Elena felt a surge of professional excitement. What kind of unit, sir? Stone pulled out a classified folder marked with security stamps. We're creating a specialized sniper unit that will conduct strategic target elimination across the entire European theater. The mission will involve the highest priority targets: enemy commanders, intelligence officers, and technical specialists whose elimination could significantly impact German war capabilities. Elena realized this was exactly the kind of assignment she had hoped for when she first walked into that recruitment office in Nebraska. "I'm honored by the opportunity, sir." Stone opened the folder and showed Elena a list of potential targets. The names included German generals, SS officers, and technical specialists whose elimination could dramatically impact enemy operations. "Your new designation," Stone said, "will be classified at the highest levels. For security purposes, you'll be identified only by the code name Black Talon. Your missions will be so sensitive that most Allied personnel won't be aware of your activities." Elena looked at the target list, understanding the responsibility she was accepting. These operations would place her at the center of the war's most crucial battles, targeting individuals whose elimination could change the course of entire campaigns. "When do I begin?" Elena asked. Stone smiled. "Your first assignment briefing is tomorrow morning. The target is a German general whose capture or elimination could provide crucial intelligence about enemy defensive plans for the approaching winter." As Elena left Stone's headquarters, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a farm in Nebraska to the battlefields of Europe, from a young woman seeking to serve her country to a strategic asset whose actions could influence the outcome of the war itself. She was no longer just Elena Kozlov. She was Black Talon, and her legend was just beginning. Winter arrived early in the Ardennes region, bringing snow that transformed the dense forest into a landscape of stark beauty and deadly concealment. Elena crouched in her carefully constructed hide site, watching the German headquarters complex through her scope as snowflakes accumulated on the lens housing she had modified to prevent such interference. 3 months had passed since she accepted the Black Talon designation, 3 months of operations that had taken her from the battlefields of France to the mountains of Italy and now to the snow-covered hills of Belgium. Each mission had been more complex than the last, each target more valuable to the enemy's war effort. The current assignment represented the culmination of everything she had learned about strategic target elimination. General Franz von Steuben commanded the German forces preparing for what intelligence indicated would be a massive winter offensive. His elimination could potentially disrupt enemy plans that threatened to reverse Allied gains across the entire Western Front. Elena's breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as she maintained her vigil. She had been in position for 18 hours, waiting for the perfect opportunity to engage her target. Von Steuben was scheduled to conduct an inspection of forward positions today, but his security detail was more extensive than any Elena had previously encountered. Through her scope, she could see German soldiers moving between buildings, their field-gray uniforms barely visible against the snow-covered landscape. The general's headquarters occupied a converted hunting lodge, its rustic architecture providing deceptive camouflage for the sophisticated communication equipment housed within. Elena's radio operator for this mission was Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, a Spanish-American woman from New Mexico whose expertise with communication equipment was matched by her skills in close-quarters combat. Santos represented the new generation of female soldiers entering specialized roles as the war's demands exceeded traditional personnel categories. Movement at the main entrance, Santos whispered from her position 10 yards behind Elena's shooting site. 3 vehicles approaching from the south road. Elena adjusted her scope's focus, studying the approaching convoy. The lead vehicle was an armored staff car followed by 2 troop transports carrying security personnel. Through her optics, she could see the distinctive pennant flying from the lead vehicle's antenna, confirming the presence of a senior officer. "That's our target," Elena murmured, watching as the convoy came to a halt in front of the headquarters building. General von Steuben emerged from the staff car with the measured movements of a professional soldier accustomed to command responsibility. He was a tall man in his 50s with the bearing of someone who had spent decades in military service. Intelligence reports indicated he was one of Germany's most capable field commanders, responsible for several tactical successes that had slowed Allied advances. Elena studied the general through her scope, noting his movements and the positioning of his security detail. 6 bodyguards surrounded von Steuben as he moved from the vehicle to the building entrance, their formation providing overlapping fields of observation and fire. Range, Elena asked quietly. Santos consulted her range-finding equipment. 730 yards to the building entrance. Wind is variable, currently northeast at 12 miles per hour with gusts to 18. Elena made the necessary calculations, adjusting her aim point to account for the difficult wind conditions and extended range. At this distance, with these environmental factors, her margin for error was minimal. The general paused at the building entrance, apparently discussing some aspect of the day's operations with his chief of staff. Elena centered her crosshairs on von Steuben's chest, accounting for wind drift and bullet drop with calculations that had become instinctive through months of combat experience. But something made her hesitate. Through her scope, she could see the general's face clearly, could observe his expressions as he spoke with his subordinates. For a moment, Elena found herself seeing von Steuben not as a target, but as a human being with thoughts, fears, and probably family members who cared about his welfare. Elena shook off the momentary hesitation, reminding herself of the intelligence briefing that had emphasized von Steuben's role in planning operations that would cost thousands of Allied lives. This was not about personal animosity, but about strategic necessity. The general began moving toward the building entrance, his security detail maintaining their protective formation. Elena's finger found the trigger's break point as she prepared to take the shot that would eliminate one of Germany's most effective field commanders. Then, Santos's urgent whisper stopped her. Air activity to the west. Multiple aircraft approaching fast. Elena lowered her rifle slightly, scanning the western horizon through her scope. She could see the distinctive silhouettes of Allied fighter-bombers approaching the valley at high speed, apparently conducting a surprise attack on the German facility. The airstrike changed everything. Elena's mission had been planned as a surgical elimination of a specific target, but the arrival of Allied aircraft meant the entire German headquarters complex would soon be under attack. Her carefully planned shot might be unnecessary if the bombing achieved the same objective. But Elena realized the airstrike also presented an opportunity for something even more valuable than von Steuben's elimination. If she could capture the general alive during the confusion of the bombing attack, the intelligence value would be enormous. Change of plans, Elena said to Santos. We're going to attempt to capture instead of elimination. Santos looked at her with surprise. That's not what we briefed, Elena. Capture operations are exponentially more dangerous. Elena continued watching the German compound through her scope as the Allied aircraft approached. The intelligence potential outweighs the risk. Von Steuben knows German defensive plans for the entire Western Front. The first bombs began falling as Elena and Santos moved from their observation position toward the German compound. The airstrike was precisely targeted, destroying communication equipment and defensive positions while avoiding the main building where von Steuben was located. Elena moved through the forest with the same skills that had made her such an effective hunter in Nebraska, using the noise and confusion of the bombing to mask her approach. Santos followed her lead, carrying equipment that would be necessary for communications during the extraction phase. The bombing lasted 15 minutes, leaving the German compound partially destroyed and its surviving personnel disorganized and confused. Elena could see soldiers emerging from damaged buildings, attempting to establish some kind of defensive perimeter while dealing with casualties and equipment failures. Elena and Santos reached the edge of the compound's defensive perimeter as the last Allied aircraft departed the area. The confusion was even greater than Elena had hoped. German soldiers were focused on damage assessment and casualty treatment rather than perimeter security. There, Elena said, pointing through the smoke toward a partially collapsed building. Von Steuben and his staff took shelter in the basement. If we move now, while they're still disoriented, we might be able to reach them before they reorganize. Santos checked her weapons and communication equipment. What's the extraction plan if we successfully capture the target? Elena consulted a map of the surrounding area. Emergency extraction point is 2 kilometers north. Special operations team will be standing by for immediate pickup once we signal successful capture. They moved through the damaged compound using smoke and debris as concealment. Elena's training in urban combat techniques proved valuable as they navigated between destroyed buildings and avoided the scattered German personnel attempting to restore order. The basement entrance was partially blocked by debris from a bombing, but Elena could see movement inside through gaps in the rubble. German voices were discussing damage reports and attempting to re-establish communication with other units. "Flashbang on my signal," Elena whispered to Santos, preparing her own equipment for the assault. Santos nodded, pulling a stun grenade from her gear and preparing to deploy it through the basement entrance. The shock effect would provide crucial seconds of advantage during the initial contact. Elena's signal was a simple hand gesture, and Santos immediately deployed the flashbang through the basement opening. The explosion created the disorientation Elena needed to enter the confined space with maximum tactical advantage. Elena moved through the basement entrance with her rifle ready, quickly identifying 3 German officers in the smoke-filled space. General von Steuben was immediately recognizable from intelligence photographs, and Elena placed her rifle's muzzle against his chest before he could fully recover from the stun grenade's effects. "Hands up," Elena said in fluent German, a language she had studied intensively during her specialized training. "You're now prisoners of Allied forces." Von Steuben's expression showed surprise and calculation as he realized the situation. He was clearly evaluating options for resistance or escape, but Elena's positioning gave him no tactical alternatives. Santos secured the other German officers while Elena maintained control of von Steuben. The basement contained maps, communication equipment, and planning documents that would provide valuable intelligence about German defensive preparations. "We need to move immediately," Santos said, monitoring radio frequencies for German response activities. Enemy forces are organizing search teams to locate their missing commander. Elena began moving von Steuben toward the basement exit, using standard prisoner handling techniques she had learned during her advanced training. The general cooperated without resistance, apparently recognizing that his survival depended on compliance with his captor's instructions. The extraction from the compound proved more challenging than their infiltration. German forces had established checkpoints around the damaged facility, searching for survivors and attempting to account for missing personnel. Elena and Santos had to use alternative routes that took advantage of bomb damage and smoke concealment. Elena's navigation skills proved crucial as they moved through unfamiliar terrain while avoiding German patrols. She led Santos and their prisoner through forest paths and stream beds that provided concealment from enemy observation posts. "Extraction point in sight," Santos reported after 2 hours of careful movement through hostile territory. Elena could see the designated rally point through her binoculars, a small clearing where Allied Special Operations personnel waited with vehicles for immediate departure. The extraction team had been monitoring their progress through radio communications and was ready for immediate pickup. The handover of von Steuben to the extraction team marked the successful completion of Elena's most ambitious mission to date. The German general would be interrogated by Allied intelligence specialists whose expertise would extract every possible detail about enemy defensive plans and capabilities. Colonel Stone was waiting at headquarters when Elena returned from the extraction site. His expression showed the professional satisfaction of a commander whose strategic gamble had achieved exceptional results. "Outstanding work, Sergeant," Stone said, reviewing initial reports about the capture operation. "Von Steuben is already providing intelligence that will save thousands of Allied lives." Elena accepted the praise quietly, but she was already thinking about the implications of this success. The capture of such a high-ranking German officer would undoubtedly attract attention from enemy intelligence services, potentially compromising her ability to conduct future covert operations. "There's something else," Stone continued, opening a classified folder. "Based on your performance over the past 6 months, you're being considered for an even more specialized assignment." Elena looked at the folder with professional curiosity. "What kind of assignment, sir?" Stone's expression grew serious. Strategic target elimination at the highest levels of enemy leadership. Targets whose elimination could potentially shorten the entire war. Elena understood immediately. Stone was talking about operations against the very top level of German command structure, missions that would require unprecedented security and operational sophistication. When would these operations begin? Elena asked. Stone consulted documents in the folder. Preliminary planning is already underway. Your next briefing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, but I can tell you now that the potential impact of success would be enormous. As Elena left Stone's office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a Nebraska farm to the center of the most crucial operations in modern warfare. Every mission had prepared her for greater challenges and more significant responsibilities. She was no longer just Black Talon. She had become something the enemy couldn't understand or predict, a strategic weapon whose very existence threatened their ability to conduct effective military operations. Walking through the headquarters complex, Elena noticed how other soldiers looked at her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Word of her successes had spread through military channels despite official secrecy, creating a reputation that preceded her into every new assignment. But Elena knew that reputation was both an asset and a liability. The more successful she became, the more resources the enemy would devote to identifying and eliminating her. Each mission would be more dangerous than the last, each target more heavily protected. That evening, as Elena prepared her equipment for the next day's briefing, she received an unexpected visitor. General Patterson, the man who had originally approved her entry into sniper training, had come to deliver news that would change everything. Sergeant Kozlov, Patterson said, settling into a chair across from her workspace. I have something to tell you about your next assignment. Elena looked up from her rifle maintenance, noting the unusual formality in the general's manner. Sir, Patterson pulled out a document bearing the highest classification markings Elena had ever seen. You've been selected for Operation Valkyrie, a joint mission with British Special Operations that targets the absolute highest level of enemy command structure. Elena felt her pulse quicken as she realized the implications. Patterson was talking about missions against targets at the very top of the German hierarchy, operations that could potentially end the war itself. The briefing tomorrow will provide full details, Patterson continued, but I wanted you to understand the significance of what you're accepting. Success could change the course of history. Failure would almost certainly result in your death. Elena met Pettersson's gaze steadily. Understand, sir. I'm ready for whatever mission serves the cause. Patterson smiled with the pride of a commander who had identified exceptional talent and seen it develop into strategic capability. I never doubted that, Sergeant. Your country is fortunate to have soldiers like you. As Patterson departed, Elena returned to her equipment preparation with renewed focus. Tomorrow would bring details about operations that could determine the war's outcome, missions that would test every skill she had developed, and every lesson she had learned. She was Elena Kozlov from Nebraska, but she was also Black Talon Mark, and her legend was about to reach its climax in operations that would echo through history. The war that had taken her father, her brother, and her fiancé was about to discover what happened when it underestimated a farm girl with a rifle and the determination to use it.